As we all know, Identity V is a horror game set in the late Victorian period. This historical backdrop is vividly portrayed through various elements, such as the distinct style of character outfits, the architectural design of the maps, and, notably, the lore surrounding each character. Considering this, you might be curious about the historical aspects that we can glean from this game. In this video, I'll explore the historical elements present in Identity V, evaluating their accuracy and pointing out any inaccuracies. Stay tuned for the details. To begin, let's discuss the setting of Identity V. The game is situated in the late Victorian era, corresponding to the period of Queen Victoria's reign over the United Kingdom, spanning from 1837 to 1901. In contemporary times, various forms of popular culture, including movies, songs, and games, frequently embrace the Victorian era as their backdrop. The rationale behind this widespread adoption lies in the era's captivating fashion and architectural design, its infusion of Gothic and mysterious elements, and the nostalgic ambiance it evokes. That being said, Identity V adopted the Victorian era as its setting. Nevertheless, there are some inaccuracies in the game. I don't really mind that, as it is part of the creative imagination of the developer, and the entire Identity V setting is fictional. However, it's fun to delve deeper into it and connect some of the things in the game with their real-life counterparts, don't you think? Pearson's flashlight stands out as one of the initial historical inaccuracies in the game. In this context, he wields a flashlight as his primary tool, capable of blinding the hunter. However, it's worth noting that flashlights were invented in 1899 and did not gain widespread attention until the early 1920s. To gain more context, in the movie Titanic, there are scenes where some of the crew uses flashlights to locate survivors. The Titanic's disaster happened in 1912, and in that time, flashlight has not been long invented, thus aren't used in the real historical event. James Cameron, the director of the film, even acknowledges it as an inaccuracy in historical accuracy, but included it for artistic purposes. Meanwhile, Pearson, in 1899, already possesses it as if it is available commercially. Furthermore, the inconsistency becomes more apparent when we observe the aged Orpheus relying on a lantern instead of a flashlight, introducing an internal inconsistency in the game's representation of available lighting technology. The inaccuracies in Emily's outfit can be discerned by referring directly to the design notes and comparing them with her role in the game. According to the design notes, Emily's outfit draws inspiration from the nurse uniforms of the First World War. However, Emily is portrayed as a doctor, not a nurse, and her game unfolds in 1899. And here are some facts about doctors during World War I. Around that time, there were few female physicians or doctors serving on the front lines, as the Army Medical Corps often rejected them for service. In contrast, nurses were in higher demand and received more favorable opportunities. Even though the concept of a woman such as Martha B. Hamphil serving as a cavalry officer in the 1800s is intriguing, it faces a significant historical obstacle. In this era, it was generally accepted that women were not allowed to hold official military positions, and their involvement was mostly limited to support roles, like working with the Red Cross or serving as nuns. To provide context, Martha's story unfolds in 1899, where she is portrayed as a cavalry officer. However, even up to World War I, which occurred 15 years later, women's participation in the military remained largely in auxiliary roles, not in frontline duties like cavalry. Additionally, only a handful of women served in frontline positions and engaged in combat during that time. Some even had to disguise themselves as men to actively participate in combat. Therefore, Martha's envisioned position as a cavalry officer within this framework appears unlikely, considering the societal limitations on women's military roles during that time. However, my research only extends so far, so if anyone possesses a deeper insight, please feel free to share it with me. The idea of Martha being a pilot in the late 1800s is equally implausible due to the absence of airplanes or gliders during that period. The advent of powered flight, a fundamental requirement for piloting, occurred well after the Victorian era. This makes it impossible for individuals like Martha or Henry, Martha's fiancé mentioned in her deduction quest, to assume such roles within the timeline depicted in the game. Likewise, Henry's potential role as a pilot encounters similar challenges because the game's established era lacks airplane technology. The absence of airplanes in their timeline rules out the feasibility of characters like Henry taking on the role of pilots. Similarly to the previous explanation, Martha's flare gun exhibits some inaccuracy with respect to historical accuracy. Martha's flare gun resembles the Webley and Scott Mark III flare gun, which was widely used in World War I. However, this specific gun was produced by the Webley and Scott Company in 1918, whereas Martha's game is set in 1899. The idea of an aeroplanist in the game setting directly contradicts historical facts. The development of jetpacks didn't take place until 1919, a significant leap forward that occurred well beyond the time period portrayed in the game. The mismatch in the timeline highlights the fictitious nature of such a character or role within the historical context of the late 1800s or early 1900s. The portrayal of specific automobiles, like the one driven by Alice in the Ashes of Memory, introduces a historical inconsistency. The specific car model she operates wasn't invented until the 1920s, posing a challenge to its authenticity within the game's setting. We can compare it to various cars available in the early 1900s for reference. Furthermore, the vehicle operated by Orpheus introduces a discrepancy in the timeline, as this specific model of automobile wasn't even created until the 1920s. This begs the question of how it ended up in the historical period portrayed within the game. While the technology behind remote control began to develop in the mid-1800s and prototypes emerged in 1898, there's no historical evidence of a mechanic doll in any form. Despite the accuracy of the concept of remote control aligning with the game setting, the inclusion of the mechanic doll itself seems to lack authenticity. The portrayal of cheerleaders within the game contradicts historical facts, as cheerleading initially involved male participants, with women's involvement only beginning in 1923. Additionally, the iconic cheerleading pom-pom wasn't invented until 1949, presenting a discrepancy in the game's timeline. So, those are the historical details I've gathered from the game so far. If you have any further insights or wish to point out any inaccuracies in my analysis, please feel free to share them in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.